We are black Africans, and we are told that our religion is not supposed to be Christianity. Christianity was brought to us by colonization. Neither is it supposed to be Islam, because if you look at the continent of Africa, the religion of Muslim is also growing so quick and so rapid. And the question is why? That is the conversation I want to talk about today. I want to explore and try and understand. We are told that as Africans, we had our own ways before colonization came. Maybe it's part of the problem, because when we adopted other people's cultures and other people's religions and started following their traditions instead of doing our own things, we abandoned our own ways. So maybe as a young African who is trying to understand who we are as Africans, who understands that there is an identity crisis within the African, then I'm reintroduced to our African ways of doing things. African spirituality, it is called to them. Those are the traditions and the things that we used to do. Growing up, I didn't grow up in a Christian family. I grew up in a family which believed in those traditions, which practiced those traditions. As I'm listening to this African spirituality being explained by the gurus of today, the Joshua Mampongas and Dr. Kanyisile and Mr. Tau Aramanuba, and I listen to these people explain and try to complicate and make it sound so complicated that we as Africans, we had this kind of belief. It sounds foreign to me, because it sounds like it's not the thing that we used to know. Those are not the traditions that we used to know as Africans. As an average person who was practicing those things, I don't identify with what they are saying. I feel like they're just trying to make it sound modern and sounds more complicated and then sound fancy, but not exactly what we used to do. They would go on and say, ours was not a religion. It was not a faith. It was not based on faith as compared to the European version that was introduced to us. But the reality is, it is a faith, because as long as there is belief involved in believing in things that you do not see, because you believe that you talk to your ancestors, to the people who died long time ago. If you believe that you speak to them and they hear you, and then they pass on the message to Umkulunkulu, to Umdali, or Umari, depending on your language. If you believe those things, Sikavan, if you believe those things, there's no scientific evidence to support the fact that your ancestors can hear you and can pass on the message to your Mkurumkuru or Umkulumkul. There's no scientific evidence, which means you're believing in things that are not seen. That is the definition of faith. So whether you're believing in a Christian God, believing that the Christian God, if you talk to him, he will do certain things to you, or whether you believe in your ancestors, we are all believing the same thing. Things that are not seen, things that are not visible. That is faith. As we were growing up, the things that we used to see mainly is the way you bury your relatives, and certain things such as rain-making ceremonies. Before the season comes, there was a ceremony very close to the beginning of the season to appease our ancestors so that the rain can come in abundance. Those things are not done anymore. People are not doing those things anymore, but it still rains. It brings the question that, was those things real? Was those things legit? Or it was just a facade? Because at the end of the day, those things are not done anymore, but it still rains in Africa. There is no place in Africa where you would point and say, because people have abandoned those ways, it doesn't rain anymore. It's not true. And they would go on and try to explain and make it sound fancy that when the Europeans came to Africa, they saw us talking to trees, they saw us talking to animals. They thought we are worshiping animals. But what we were doing is that we understand that we are one with the tree, we are one with nature. So we were just communicating with the powers that be. But the reality is, the people who actually practice those things do not think that way. They don't believe that way. What they believe when it comes to speaking to animals, you would have a cattle at home, a bull, that you would name the name of your grandfather, and you were trying to incarnate or breed your father to sit on that cow. So whenever you have a problem, you go and speak to that cow, and that cow is treated a certain way, different from the other cows. That cow is not chewed randomly. That cow cannot be sold. And it is believed now that that cow would be protecting yourself, will be protecting your household and your family. Those things are questionable. That is why people begin to leave them, because they don't believe those things are true and those things are real. And these people, they pin everything about Christianity on it being European and being brought to Africa by colonizers. Yes, which is true. Christianity was brought to us by Europeans when they came to colonize Africa. But there's nothing European about Christianity. Christianity is based on the Bible, and the Bible is full of stories from the Middle East. That Jesus that people talk about is from the Middle East. It's nothing to do with Europeans. The first Christian church was established in the Middle East. For you to blame Christianity and say Christianity is wrong because it's European and because it was brought to us by Europeans, it cannot be true. It cannot be that your only argument against Christianity is because it was brought by Europeans and it is European. Because in Europe themselves, 2/3 of Europeans are Christians. If you Google that number, you find it. They believe in that Christianity. They follow those traditions of Christianity. If it was designed to colonize Africa, they wouldn't believe in it. They would know, they would understand, and they would not follow the Christianity. They wouldn't be Christians themselves. So it means Christianity was not designed to be a tool and a weapon to colonize Africa. And goes to the reasons why people in Africa, because the reality is people are abandoning those ways that are supposed to be our ways, that are supposed to be the right way for us to connect to our creator or to our originator. People are abandoning those things and following Christianity. Is it because of colonization? Of course not. Christianity has grown even so much post-colonization in recent years. Christianity has shooted from around maybe in the 70s. Christians were about 100 million in Africa. Today we are talking about close to 700 million people in Africa. If we take that number and look at people who do not identify as Christians but still believe in a God which is defined as a Christian God, that number would go to 1 billion. The question is it because of colonization, or is because people are actually convinced that the Christian way is the way to do things, is the way to simplify things? Because I would remember when we were growing up, many families would convert and get baptized or whatever, join a church, so that they can be buried simple than compared to that complex way of burial which we were doing in our traditions. And people would say, no, he passed on and he's died in peace and he's resting because he died as a Christian, because he had converted to a church. So it makes it easy for that person to die and to die in peace, rather than compared to those things of our spirituality that we were doing, that would end up causing issues in the future, causing sometimes people to say he's coming back because of the way he was buried, or because of this and because of that. So people are moving away from those ways because they are not attracted, and they are not convinced that those are the good ways and those are the right ways. It is not only just because of colonization. It is not about colonization. As I'm speaking to you, I believed those things and I converted to Christianity, and I also left Christianity. I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm looking for an answer. So that's why I'm asking these questions. When I watch these African spirituality gurus explain and talk about African spirituality, I come to all these questions. That's why I'm asking these questions, so that we can have a conversation and find answers. Maybe our solution is there, where in our African spirituality, but we also need to understand. That's why we're asking questions. Oh, what about all these gates? What about all these things that we need to understand? And we go on and they go on and talk about Europeans coming to Africa and demonizing Inyanga, calling them witch doctors, Nyanga or Nyanga, I don't know, depending on your language. Okay, they call them witch doctors, and they say, I know this is demonizing our people. You cannot marry or relate a witch and a doctor together. But the reality is people are ignoring the English language here. It has become a talking point, ignoring the reality of that word. We have doctors in the world. They are all not just simply called doctors. Yes, it is their title that they are doctors. Within those doctors, they have another name which defines their specialties. Doctor for kids, doctor for this, and doctor for a heart surgeon is a doctor, but is called a heart surgeon because he specializes in operating the heart. That is the same thing. Why they called witch doctor is because they saw these inyanga, these doctors, healing people that have been bewitched. So they called them witch doctor. They are not trying to say he's a witch and a doctor at the same time. People are just ignoring and making it a talking point just because it proves a point. It proves a certain point that Europeans came and demonized our religion. With all due respect to our elders, such as Ujoshua Maponga, Tao Haramanuba, and Dr. Kanyisile from South Africa, we do respect them and we would want to have more conversations with them so that they can also explain these things that we have questions on. Maybe when our elders are speaking, we must listen so that we can do the right thing, so that maybe we can have a better life in Africa. And sometimes when you try to study and try to listen to what they say, to our African spirituality gurus, what they say, they end up saying, no, we don't give you any books. You're not supposed to go anywhere. You're supposed to find it within yourself. If you are speaking to a young African who is confused, who is actually trying to find, who's trying to do some soul searching and some research to understand what they are supposed to do, what African spirituality actually means, it even confuses them even more, because if you say it is within me already, but I'm looking for it, what do you actually mean? And another talking point, another school of thought within this African spirituality environment is, we as Africans, we come from the soil, we come from nature, we come from water. They make it sound as if it's only us who come from the soil, who come from the water, and who come from nature, as if other races and other nations did not come from that from nature and does not come from soil. Because the reality is, human beings, we are all the same across the board, whether you are Indian, whether you are white, and whether you're Chinese. We are all the same, except for our hair and the color of our skin. Everything else, human beings are the same. We all have 2 eyes, 2 legs, and then 10 toes and 10 fingers. We all eat and go to the toilet. We all need to breathe air. Human beings are the same. Fundamentally, we are all the same, which means the source that we come from should be the same, and we should all have the same God. So they want to make it sound as if the God for the Africans, for the black people, is not the same as the God for the Europeans because they are white. Us, we are black. We come from nature, and then our God is our own God for the black people, and there's a God for the Europeans and for other races in the world, which I find to not be true. Trying to have a conversation is trying to look for answers so that we can understand what it means to be African, what we are supposed to be doing. But there's a very, very thin line, very, very faint line between good and evil within our African traditions. That is why people ended up leaving it, because the same inyanga, the same witch doctor that is defined as a witch doctor, the same person who is supposed to heal you if you have been bewitched, can also give you something that can bewitch other people. It can also hate other people. So there's a very thin line between good and evil. The things that people do, sometimes they harm others. That is why it ended up being called witchcraft, because it seems like it's the same thing. Everything within this bracket is evil and is terrible. The memories that people have, the ideas that the people have, the experiences that people have within these traditions of ours, people have bad memories and they don't like it. That's why people are moving away from it. So if you have a different opinion, let's have a conversation. Let's understand, let's get to define what is it that we are supposed to be doing, what is it which is good within those traditions, which can take us forward as Africans.